Coming up on Arirang News, President Yoon is heading to Japan next week for a summit with Prime Minister Fumio Kishida. His visit follows Seoul's decision to compensate Korean victims of Japan's wartime forced labor with its own fund. North Korea fires a short-range ballistic missile towards the Western Sea. South Korean forces tighten their guard and maintain military readiness posture while closely working with the U.S. People with disabilities in South Korea will be able to choose the welfare support they need. This included in the government's comprehensive policy plans for the disabled, covering the next 5 years. Good evening. It's 9 p.m. here in South Korea. Thank you for joining us on Arirang News. We begin with President Yoon scheduled summit with Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida. President Yoon is heading to Japan next Thursday for 2 days, marking the first visit by a South Korean president to Japan in 12 years. The presidential office announced a date on Thursday, saying while a summit will be held, specific details are still being worked out with Tokyo. It said Seoul hopes the visit can pave the way for the two countries to move on from the unfortunate history and hopes that it fosters better cooperation in security, trade, and culture. Meanwhile, amid efforts to ramp up trilateral cooperation with the United States, Presidential Press Secretary Kim Eun-hye noted that during Yoon's state visit to the Washington, D.C. in April, U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris and State Secretary Antony Blinken will join him for lunch a day after President Yoon's summit with President Biden. South Korean Prime Minister Han Doksu has defended the government's decision to compensate the Korean victims of Japanese wartime forced labor. Speaking at a ministerial meeting on Thursday, Han said the decision was made independently by Seoul and came after close consultations with experts. Han explained that it was aimed at helping a future-oriented relationship with Japan. Describing Japan as a crucial neighbor in the economic and security sectors, the Prime Minister expressed hope that the Seoul-Doksu relationship can contribute to bringing peace and stability around the world. The remark comes amid criticism that the compensation will be paid from a fund made up of donations from the public sector instead of the accused Japanese companies. North Korea fired one short ballistic missile towards the West Sea on Thursday. That's according to South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff. It detected the regime's SRBM launched from northwestern port city of Nampo at 6:20 p.m. The South Korean military is working closely with the U.S. in order to be fully prepared for more provocations. The latest launch came ahead of the Freedom Shield, a South Korea-U.S. joint military exercise which is set to take place from next Monday for 11 days. The two allies will conduct a number of large-scale combined field training exercises called Full Eagle, restored to full scale for the first time in 5 years. Pyongyang has no plan to surrender its nuclear weapons ambitions and remains determined to expand its arsenal. Now, this is according to the latest annual assessment by the U.S. intelligence community. Our defense correspondent Kim Hyun-suk explains.
North Korea has no intention of giving up its weapons program. This from the annual threat assessment from the U.S. Director of National Intelligence released on Wednesday, Washington local time. The report says that the regime's leader Kim Jong-un believes nuclear weapons and ICBMs are needed to guarantee his rule and could help make his footing as a nuclear power. He also hopes to shift the regional security situation in his favor while counteracting South Korean President Yoon hardline stance against the North. This comes as a major threat to the U.S. and its allies. Pyongyang's cyber threats also loom large. Last year, Pyongyang's cyber forces stole $625 million from a Singapore-based tech firm. The U.S. believes North Korea could disrupt some U.S. infrastructure and businesses, albeit in a small or limited way. To deter future cyber threats from Pyongyang, South Korea's foreign ministry said on Wednesday that it is working closely with the U.S. to investigate cyber crimes. However, according to the threat assessment, the biggest threat to the U.S. is China.
People's Republic of China, which is increasingly challenging the United States economically, technologically, politically, and militarily around the world, remains our unparalleled priority.
Speaking at the Senate Intelligence Committee on Wednesday Washington time, the National Intelligence Director also called out the Chinese Communist Party to be, quote, the most consequential threat, especially as it is deepening its ties with Russia. The DNI report called China a near-peer competitor and revealed that China is building hundreds of new ICBM silos. China's threat could further grow as the country exerts power over Taiwan, a key semiconductor producer. Kim Hyun-sung, Arirang News.
The Air Forces of South Korea and the U.S. have been conducting combined exercise since Monday to improve interoperability between the two forces. The training involved a total of around 10 warplanes, including South Korea's F-15Ks and A-10 tank killers from the U.S. On Thursday, the South Korean Air Force released footage of the drills showing the American aircraft dropping flares that emit extremely bright light to mislead the enemy's targeting systems. Throughout the drill that will be held until Friday at Ulsan Air Base, the two countries will focus on enhancing teamwork and sharing their latest war tactics. A groundbreaking ceremony was held today for the Shaheen Project, a mega petrochemical facilities in the South Korean city of Ulsan. The $7 billion project, which is the key fruit of South Korea's sales diplomacy with Saudi Arabia, is the largest single foreign investment in the country so far. Our Shin-Young has the details.
South Korea-based refiner S-Oil has begun construction of its Shaheen Project. A groundbreaking ceremony for the $7 billion project took place on Thursday in the southeastern city of Ulsan. S-Oil finalized the project in November last year when the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman, visited Seoul. It aims to build a steam cracking facility and other units to produce up to 3.2 million tons of petrochemical products a year. When the Shaheen project is completed, it is expected to play an important role in diversifying the company's petroleum refining business by expanding its portfolio in petrochemicals from 12% to over 25%. The project has investment from oil giant Saudi Aramco, the largest shareholder of S-Oil, marking the largest foreign investment project for a single industry in South Korea. During the groundbreaking ceremony on Thursday, President Yoon said that the project is a key achievement of economic diplomacy between South Korea and Saudi Arabia, pledging to provide a better environment in South Korea for foreign investment firms.
앞으로도 정부는 외국인 투자 기업들이 한국에서 마음껏 경영 활동을 할 수 있도록 세계 최고의 환경을 만들기 위해 최선을 다할 것입니다. 글로벌 스탠더드에 맞지 않는 규제는 과감하게 개선하고 대한민국을 세계 최고의 혁신 허브로 만들겠습니다.
Meanwhile, the project is expected to create 17,000 new jobs during the construction stage and an added value to the economy worth about 3 trillion won or over $2 billion. With the construction expected to be completed in 2026, South Korea's exports are forecast to increase by $900 million in the future. Shin-Young, Arirang News.
Moving on to smart solutions. Korean technology related to the farming of fruits and vegetables, regardless of climate conditions, has secured a substantial order from the Middle East. Yoon has more.
This vegetable smart farm used to be an area of abandoned underground shops. Domestic efforts in advancing smart farming technology now allow optimization of light, heat, humidity, and nutrition for the vegetables, even underground. And the cultivation period can also be reduced by half or even up to a third of the time it would normally take.
We've developed low-heat and high-efficiency LEDs that specifically allow plants to grow in optimal conditions.
The types of plants grown have diversified from leafy vegetables to strawberries, with plans to expand to flowers in the future, which would add value to the technology. The plants can be preserved for longer, and the size to which they grow to can also be controlled. This means these plants can be grown in conditions regardless of region or season, which has attracted Middle Eastern countries that have a dry, subtropical climate. A Korean company has formed a joint venture with a company in Kuwait with plans to export $27 million worth of smart farming plants to 6 different countries in the Middle East. And the South Korean government is in full support of this project as a means to revitalize exports to this region after the recent global economic crisis.
We have strong marketability and potential for economic and trade cooperation in the Middle Eastern market, where demand and purchasing power remain big.
South Korean export items to this region have been concentrated in automobiles, semiconductors, and batteries made by large companies. But now, growing domestic support for small and medium-sized companies will also contribute to diversifying exports and increasing competitiveness. Yoon, Arirang News.
As one of South Korea's key export products, the chip industry has weathered some difficult storms in recent months, with external factors making things more difficult. Our business correspondent Lee Dae-yeon explains further.
South Korea's chip industry has been seeing a sharp downturn since the second half of last year. According to data released by the Trade Ministry, chip exports dropped 42.5% on year in February. It also saw a drop of 44.5% in January. Because of this, chip inventory jumped 28% in January from a month earlier to the highest level in almost 26 years. Compared to a year earlier, stockpiles have increased 39.5%. One of the central issues is the U.S. CHIPS Act. The Biden administration last week announced 6 requirements needed to access the $39 billion of funding for companies building chip plants in the U.S. But the problem is that some of the strings attached are an obstacle for Korean companies. For example, so-called guardrail provisions, which state that companies receiving subsidies may not build new plants in China nor invest in their current facility on the mainland for the next 10 years. Companies also have to share some of their unexpected excess profits with the U.S. government, provide access to production facilities, and take part in U.S. research and development projects. Meanwhile, South Korea's Minister for Trade left for Washington, D.C. on Wednesday to discuss the CHIPS Act with top officials of the U.S. and will bring up the issues and possibly come up with countermeasures. President Yoon also plans to meet U.S. President Joe Biden next month, where the U.S. CHIPS Act and the Inflation Reduction Act are likely to be up for discussion.
There's a low possibility that the U.S. has considered South Korea's chip industry. So, Korean companies should proactively talk with the U.S. while the government compromises it as a diplomatic issue. It's important to cooperate with the U.S. and the neighboring countries for friend-shoring chips.
And the main opposition Democratic Party of Korea said on Tuesday that it plans to propose tax credits of up to 30% for companies investing in chip production in the coming weeks, adding to the government's tax break bill submitted to the National Assembly in January. Lee Dae-yeon, Arirang News.
South Korean health authorities are actively discussing whether to lift the mask-wearing rule when using public transport among the remaining COVID prevention measures. A decision is expected next week. Kim Jung-sil has the details.
Will people in South Korea finally be able to ride trains and buses without masks? The Korea Disease Control and Prevention Agency announced on Thursday that they're currently discussing the possibility with health experts and plan to announce the change, if there is one, next week. Since the mask mandate first began to ease back in January, people in South Korea have been able to go to most places without a mask.
The number of cases has been declining for 9 weeks in a row. Therefore, we believe that the winter wave has reached a stable point after going through something of a decline.
Other than public transport, the places that still require masks include hospitals, pharmacies, and care facilities. On Tuesday, after seeing stability in the country's COVID-19 situation, the South Korean government suggested to the National Advisory Committee for Infectious Diseases that the rule be ended for public transport. And apparently, many of the experts there said that would be okay. The government is expected to thoroughly review the experts' opinions and will likely announce sometime next week when masking on public transport will finally end. The officials are also reportedly discussing changes to the remaining quarantine measures, such as 7 days of self-isolation and an even wider end to mask wearing if the situation remains stable. Kim Jung-sil, Arirang News.
The South Korean government earlier today announced a new 5-year plan to improve the welfare and quality of life of those with disabilities. The plan is to introduce personalized support and urgent 24-hour care programs. Our Lee Si-woo explains the changes we expect to see.
By the year 2026, the disabled in South Korea will have the option to pick and choose the types of welfare services they'd like to receive depending on their need. That's according to the comprehensive policy plans for the disabled announced on Thursday by the South Korean government. At a meeting led by Prime Minister Doksu, the specifics of the plans covering the next 5 years were explained by South Korea's Organization of Policy Coordination Committee for Persons with Disabilities. The plan aims to improve the quality of life of the disabled by supporting 8 different areas of their lives. The core areas for support include welfare, education, and culture and arts. Whereas until now, disability benefits in the form of services or stipends were predetermined by factors such as health conditions or income, in the coming years the system will change so that individuals can choose the types of benefits to a certain degree. For example, the disabled could use their stipends for purchasing support equipment or remodeling their personal vehicles to make them more accessible. This April, the pilot launch for the urgent 24-hour care program will take place in 17 cities and provinces around the country. A maximum of week-long care will be available for those with developmental disabilities in the absence of their caretakers. The government will also support disabled artist groups and create platforms for artwork sales. Meanwhile, the comprehensive policy plans for the disabled have been developed every 5 years since 1998. The plans announced Thursday are the 6th of their kind thus far. Lee Si-woo, Arirang News.
The European Union plans to spend at least $1.1 billion on ammunition for Ukraine and refill the bloc's stockpiles. EU Foreign Policy Chief Josep Borrell said Wednesday that the suggestion was made as Ukraine needs more supplies. Such efforts will be aimed at getting countries to procure 155mm shells, the NATO standard artillery munition, while searching ways to ramp up production. In the meantime, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg says he cannot rule out that Russian forces will soon take over the eastern city of Bakhmut. The head of the Wagner private military company earlier claimed that the western part of Bakhmut is under Russian control. Ukraine's military says Russian attacks in the area continue but calls them unsuccessful. South Korea falls to Australia 8-7 during its World Baseball Classic opener in Tokyo. Today's loss means Korea must beat rival Japan tomorrow if the team is to stand any chance of advancing to the quarterfinals. Shin Se-byuk with more.
South Korea opened its World Baseball Classic campaign with a loss to underdogs Australia, going down 8-7 at the Tokyo Dome on Thursday. The two teams traded zeros for the first 3 innings. But Australia broke the deadlock in the top 4th against starting pitcher Ko Young-pyo. During the 9 innings, Australia pounded out 10 hits with Tim Connolly, Robbie Glendening, and Robbie Perkins each going deep. With the top 2 from each of the 4 groups of 5 teams moving on to the quarterfinals, a win against Australia would have greatly boosted Team Korea's chances. With the opening win in Pool B, Australia is now well positioned to grab one of the tickets to the quarterfinals along with Japan. South Korea, on the other hand, now faces the daunting task of beating world number 1 Japan on Friday to have any chance of advancing. If the Korean squad doesn't make it to the next stage, it will be the team's first round exit for the third straight time after 2013 and 2017. 신세벽, Arirang News.
The new manager of South Korea's men's football team, Jurgen Klinsmann, says he's targeting Asian Cup glory and wants to bring a positive energy and confidence to his team. Our Choi Soo-young tells us more on his first conference in Korea since taking over.
South Korea's new head coach Jurgen Klinsmann on Thursday spoke to the nation's media for the first time since taking over the Taeguk Warriors. He was appointed on Monday last week and arrived at Incheon Airport at 5 a.m. on Wednesday. At the Thursday's press conference, Klinsmann officially announced who will be joining his backroom staff. Andreas Herzog, who has been working with Klinsmann since 2011, is his number 2, while former Taeguk warrior and German-born Chaduri is a technical advisor. Michael Kim, who was part of Paolo Bento's staff, joins as a coach as 2 Italian Paolo Stringara, while Andreas Kupke is goalkeeper coach and Werner Luthert is fitness coach. Following questions about the specific tactics he will use, Klinsmann said that he respects Paolo Bento's ideas, the former manager, and he plans to communicate closely with players. He added that technical ability, body language, communication, and confidence will be the most key parts of his team. Moreover, as a legendary striker, he said that he will lead the team by attacking.
My personal background was a striker, so I always love to attack.
According to the Korea Football Association, Klinsmann has signed for a period of 3 years and 5 months until after the 2026 FIFA World Cup in North America and will reside in Korea during that time. He also mentioned that his coaching staff will move freely in and out of Korea, but they will always be with the players wherever and whenever they'll need it. He said that he knows how to bring a confident energy and strong belief to a team, and has set a short-term blueprint to win the AFC Asian Cup in Qatar next January. Choi Soo-young, Arirang News.
The Seoul city government announced its project to make the Han River more convenient and attractive for visitors. Dubbed the Great Han River Project Plan, Seoul Mayor Oh Se-hoon on Thursday said new public facilities will be built along the Han River. One of the most iconic places to visit in Seoul, the Han River stretches through the Korean capital. The project will consist of building a variety of cultural, tourist, port, and business facilities. This includes a second Sejong Center for the Performing Arts on Yeouido and installing gondola cable cars connecting the northern and southern riverbanks of the Han River. The city also added it is scrapping the height limit for residential buildings alongside the river, currently set at 15th floors.
The forecast calls for widespread warmth and clear skies for tomorrow. Keep in mind that such unseasonably warm conditions for the daytime will widen daily temperature gaps. While Seoul will see a gap of 16 degrees between day and night, other inland regions will see a bigger difference. For places like Chuncheon and Jangsu, a drastic fluctuation will be seen with a gap of 20 degrees or more. Dressing in layers will be highly recommended. And finest concentrations will stay high for central regions and the surrounding areas. That includes the Seoul metropolitan area, so make sure to have a mask that can filter out the dust particles. Expect dry conditions to persist for the east of the country. For Gangwon-do province, gusty winds will also accompany at times. And sunny spells will dominate nationwide. Seoul and Daegu will be starting off at 6 degrees tomorrow. Highs in Seoul will jump to 22 degrees, Gwangju 26, Gyeongju will be topping out at 23 degrees. And nationwide rain is in the forecast on Sunday. After the rain, a surge of cold air will be filtering in. That's all for now, and here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is all for tonight's newscast. Thank you for watching. We'll be back with the most up-to-date news tomorrow. Good night.